Chapter 25. There were 14 drones and a single queen, 9 unidentified lifeforms, and 3 humans. Max calculated the distance between all of them and chose pulse over fire, Ellis struggling to translate the difference in the glowing green forms. Max had been designed to find an implant signal in the designated TEEP. He was the designated lifeform and cut out firing before extermination could occur, destroying everything in its single-minded path to the beacon. These humans had no implants, and Max's mind had no signal urging it on. It was up to Ellis to manipulate the program, and his influence wasn't constant, his consciousness unstable. There was distant pain, distant understanding of body, radical fluctuations in awareness. Max did not know what these things meant, and it was all Ellis could do to hold on. Max fired, sweeping in a contained pattern across the 24 alien objects that clustered in front of its sensors. Closest at 17.3 meters, secondary liquid expulsion maximum 2 meters. Acid spray at its worst. Can't let it reach the 3 forms because Ellis realized that this was what had been designated, what he had wanted at some prior instance. These are Lara and Jess and... He pushed into the realm of sensory feed, his mind reaching for the stats and commands, finding them easily. Getting them to Max was harder. Ellis's elastic human thoughts complicating the process. Separate objects at 7.7.3, 8.4 active cease. Max continued to fire. The direction correlated, and Ellis was pleased. Until a wave of dark slid through him, temporarily removing him from the hole. After some indeterminate time, he was with Max again. With Max's help, he estimated the loss of awareness to be no more than 2 seconds, and no less than 1. Body-mind is reacting. Must not fight it, but stay here, stay with Max. Max wouldn't work without him, but he knew that he was being drained, that some vital part of Ellis was being used up. This was unavoidable. He accepted it, but he couldn't let the loss stop them from their purpose, and he didn't know how long he could go on. The area had been cleared of all but the 3 objects he'd activated the cutoff for. Max continued to fire into the lines of the jungle, its sensors finding the forms of 4 figures previously identified as the not drones. Like that one on the deck. They're hiding, watching, preparing. Bad guys. Max accepted the identification. It sent 32 more rounds through the walls of shifting green, 3 of the bad guys falling, the 4th retreating out of sensory range. Max discontinued its strike, waiting, not prepared to move without some input from Ellis. One of the humans approached. Ellis struggled to the surface, wanting to be there for the interaction, needing to be. Max would not respond. Ellis, are you... He pushed harder, the pain sharpening, becoming unpleasant. He pushed anyway, knowing that he could recognize the voice, the cool and soothing voice that he had known many times before. He heard her, and heard the others speaking at the same time behind her, their voices softer. Max sorted through each vocal pattern and fed Ellis all 3 simultaneously, Ellis working through them as quickly as he could. Ellis. Brian. Can you speak? It's Lara. It's Catherine Lara. Lara. Your friend is inside a robot? Small, female, unknown. Not a robot. That's a Max. Mobile Assault Exo Warrior. Stupid kid. I can't believe he'd do this to himself. Jess, angry and worried, faded out like a wave in the abyss. Lara, Ellis said, or thought. He knew he should say more, but couldn't find the strength. The darkness tried to take over again, but he held on. Lara was speaking, and he wanted very much to tell her that he was okay, that it wasn't a mistake. We're going to help you. Don't worry, it's okay, Brian. We'll get you out of there now. No, she didn't understand. With a supreme force of will, Ellis found his voice. It was as distant and meaningless as his body, but he bent it to his will. meaning to make them understand. Max didn't understand, but Ellis had discovered that Max didn't necessarily need to understand everything. If you survive, you need me no argument, Lara. Jess. The trio of shapes held still, silent, and Ellis wasn't sure if they'd heard him, even as Max told him that his voice had registered in an audible range. It was Jess who spoke finally, and Ellis knew that he was trying not to cry. Max knew that the object was a 1.1 meters distance. Okay, kid, this is Machiko Noguchi. She's a friend now. We're going to follow her to a ship and go home, so just hang in for a while, okay? We're going home. Max requested data. Ellis explained that there was to be movement, the sound of words outside becoming sounds. Ellis moving back again so that the Max could be strong for all of them. Noguchi was glad that Lara and Jess agreed to their friend's decision, whether or not it was the wisest for his health. The Queen had escaped the shell. She'd seen the link of chain still hanging from her ebony headdress, and knew now that she'd been a fool to believe that a simple crash could kill the Bug Mother. And does she recognize me as the hunters did, as the being who trapped her? No one knew enough about the species to say what a queen could or couldn't do. But she was surely smart enough. And if the Queen actually understood who she was, it meant Noguchi was marked by 2 alien species as enemy, which meant that having the Max with them bolstered their chances from none to slim. And if I wasn't here at all, what would the chances be then? Lara stood next to the Max, looking up into the squared face of the suit, the smoking glow from the station fire softening the robot's sharp angles. It was easily 3.5 meters tall, and 1 meter across at its widest. Humanoid, the numbers 09 in scuffed white on its thickly plated torso. It looked like a bodybuilder made from giant metal blocks. Indestructible. But the look on Lara's face suggested that the man inside was anything but. The suit's constructed to interface with a surgical implant, Jess said softly. He'd hung back, standing with Noguchi near the crushed deck where they'd found cover. Ellis doesn't have one. He went into the Max back on that station. Saved our lives. But it almost killed him. Jess shook his head, a mix of sadness and respect in his deep, exhausted voice. We should have known, Lara and I. We thought he was just sick, recovering, you know? But it seems like he got it into his head that this was all he could do to help. Noguchi nodded slowly, feeling some small connection to Ellis, thinking that bravery and stupidity were often closely linked. Like me, coming here, so fired up to break with the hunters and avenge my honor that I didn't even consider what my presence would mean to these people. At least Ellis had only risked himself. She'd risked all of them. Noguchi walked towards Lara and Max, Jess following. They needed to talk. When they were all together, she took a deep breath and dived in. The hunters want my head, she said. If they haven't already called off their hunt to search for me, they're doing it now. The good thing is, they have rules, and I've been with them long enough to have some idea of what they are. But the Queen doesn't, and she may want me even worse than they do. I think if we split up, meet at the transport. Lara cut her off, frowning sharply. No, we stick together. They don't want you, Noguchi said patiently. And you've got Ellis to help, to get to the ship. 2 clicks west. That's the last signal reading. One of you has pilot training, right? Lara nodded. Yes, but I don't. The controls are intuitive, Noguchi said. Except you push on the collective to gain altitude and you pull back to descend. I can't explain the navigational system, but you'll be able to get a safe distance away if I don't make it. No offense, but that's bullshit, Jess said angrily. We're not splitting up, okay? You risked your life to get here, to get to us. And you're willing to risk yours to return the favor? Noguchi snapped. Jess and Lara were both silent for a beat, Ellis Max standing mute and unmoving, only the hissing pops of the ebbing fire to be heard. And then Jess grinned, a tired, sweet smile. "Well, yeah, pretty much," he said, and Lara nodded. Noguchi wanted to protest, but realized that they decided, and that in their position, she would do the same. The realization didn't lessen the feelings of warmth and gratitude that filled her. Whatever happened, she knew now that she'd made the right choice. My own kind. "Let's go then," she said, slipping on her mask and turning away, relieved that she could cover her face. She wasn't ashamed of her tears, but now wasn't the time for emotion. If these good people meant to stay with her, they were going to have to be ready for anything. They moved into the wooded jungle, Noguchi in the lead, Ellis bringing up the rear. Jess stumbled along behind Lara, aching and bone-weary, but with enough determination to hold himself together. Finding Ellis, or Ellis finding them, had provided Jess with another reason to keep going. He owed Ellis, and the kid had put his life on the line to help them. Again. "We gotta get him out of the Max, ASAP. For as shitty as I feel, I didn't lobotomize myself. And if he could do that for us, I can at least get my sorry ass through a couple of clicks of jungle." They walked in silence, or as much as they could manage with a ton plus of metal stomping behind them. The going wasn't too bad, although there was a lot of climbing over rotting logs and skirting trees, slowing them up. It would have been easier to let Max go first, clear them a path, but Lara had pointed out that he'd be more effective, better able to sense movement to either side, if he stayed in back. Ellis seemed to understand, although he'd said nothing when they'd explained it to them. Jess was afraid for him, the fear mixed with guilt that they hadn't pulled him out of the Max immediately. He's right though. We need him. The hunters had been something to see, and Jess didn't know that defeating an alien queen was even possible without the kind of firepower that Max possessed. They just reached a clearing, a grassy area that Noguchi started to edge around, when Ellis stopped, the rumbling crunch of his steps cut off. They all froze, Jess feeling new fear for the kid, wondering if this was it, not even halfway to the alien transport. Ellis's weak, stuttering voice let Jess breathe again, but inspired a different kind of fear. "Someone coming," Ellis said, and raised both arms, aiming at 1 o'clock. Noguchi had already dropped into a crouch, weapon ready, and Jess and Lara followed suit, new adrenaline humming through his body as thoughts raced through his mind. Hunter or drone? How many burner shots can Max take? The suit's solid, but it wasn't built for those, and what if this is a distraction, a trap? Jess clamped down, had to keep his shit wired. He held the burner and waited. Noguchi held one of her hands up in a fist and twisted it back and forth. Jess didn't know the signal, but she seemed to realize that, whispering back a second later, "Get ready." A crashing, rustling sound. Whatever it was getting closer, coming through the trees from across the small clearing. It was big. Could be anything. The shadowy figure stepped out into the starlight a second later, and Jess almost fired. There was something wrong with it. The shape of its head strange, its torso deformed. "Oh, God," Lara whispered, and Jess saw what it was, and felt a kind of vindication rise up inside, feelings of gratification that he recognized as petty and mean, and deeply satisfying. It was Nirasawa, his face mutilated, the now obvious synthetic skin hanging in melted shreds from an exposed carbon fiber cheekbone, and he was carrying Lucas Briggs, the exec's limp body in his arms, a facehugger wrapped tightly around the bastard's head.